Gandhim pushtivadanam urvarukamiva bandanam mrityormukshiyamamritat.
Welcome to Ayurveda and Spirituality with your host, Alakananda Ma, a renowned Ayurvedic expert and a graduate of a top London medical school. She is the principal of Alundi Ayurveda Gurukula, a unique apprenticeship-style school in Boulder, Colorado. She is a spiritual mother, teacher, flower essence maker, and storyteller. Join us as we uncover the timeless principles of Ayurveda, discover practical tips for enhancing vitality, and explore the deeper dimensions of spirituality that intertwine with the ancient science of life.
Vedavamitam Purusamahantam Adityavarnam Tamasa Parastat Swamivam Vaditva Atutmartamiti Nanya Panta Vadyate Aneya Nanya Panta Vadyate Aneya. Welcome everyone, welcome to Satsang. Satsang is a meeting of hearts, a gathering of friends to inquire into the truth. Today we're going to be thinking about where this world comes from and where is it going. That is the subject of not exactly cosmology, that's not quite the right word. The real word is cosmogony, the genesis of our world. And for some people, eschatology, also the ending of our world. Because how we think of our cosmogony affects the way we live in our world and the way we treat our world and each other. And right now we have two opposing cosmogonies going, and neither of them work. So, as we've discussed in many of our talks, and beginning with the talk on the Mother's Awakening in the Age of Aquarius that came at the beginning of the whole talk cycle, we are living through the last days of the Age of Pisces. And as it said in the musical Hair back when I was a young girl, the dawning of the Age of Aquarius. I have to say, although in theory I knew the last days of Pisces would be bad, living through it is something else. I had no idea what it'd be really like to live through these polarizations in attitudes and views that then lead to the unhelpful ways in which we treat each other and our world. So the two cosmogonies that we have going right now is evolution and creationism. So the idea of creationism, this is actually believed by millions of people, that despite all the geological evidence to the contrary, once upon a time, not very long ago, just a few thousand years ago, God made the world in 7 days. And he made the world like a wind-up toy. It got made, and then God was done and went to sleep. And this wind-up toy world is ticking along until it's not wound up anymore, and then the world will end. If we think like this, it greatly affects how we treat each other and how we treat our world. The world has been made like a little toy car, and when that toy car wears out, it goes to the dump. So why should we take good care of our world, which is bound to end? Not going to last for very long. In fact, we're in the last days of it. And then what's going to happen? All of us good people, the ones that have acknowledged the Lord Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, are going to be taken up in a rapture. We're going to get off this rotten old world and all its problems. And all the bad people, the people who are not us, deserve the worst they can get. So they're going to have Armageddon. They're going to have a massive battle, which takes place in the land of Israel. I was discussing this with Sadananda recently. I said, I've been to the plain of Megiddo. It's on the plain of Megiddo that this last battle is supposed to happen. And they're going to have a horrible battle and they're going to suffer under the Antichrist. But it's okay because they deserved it. But we don't need to take care of a world that is bound to end, and we're going to go to a better place pretty soon. There's also in this a misinterpretation, a mistranslation of a Hebrew word, which in the English Bible is translated as have dominion. We're supposed to have dominion over the earth. And dominion goes with the dominator paradigm. So we can clear cut the forests, we can trawl out the fish, right? We can strip mine. We can do whatever we want to do. We can have the factory farms because we're the boss. We have dominion. It's all for us. We can take whatever we want. So we don't need to care for the environment because it's just ours to use up. And then when it's used up and the toy car is worn out and the world ends, and that's fine. On to a better place. It's going to get all used up in the due course of time. So we might as well dominate it and get what we can uh, before it goes to the dump. I didn't check this time to see if the site is still there. Maybe Marshika has checked it, but there is or was a site called rapture.com that tells you when it's coming and how soon are you going to get a lift off of this horrible world that we've messed up and leave behind all the troublesome people and get on to something better. Uh, this kind of cosmogony does not lead to empathy and care for others because if people are suffering, that's their problem. They're suffering because they're not one of us. And if we're messing up the earth, we have the right to have dominion over it. It doesn't bring on altruism. It doesn't bring on care for the earth. In fact, at the Women's March in 2016, I marched with a huge sign that I had made that said, "Make empathy great again." And everybody loved my sign, and everyone was calling me, "Oh, you're the empathy woman." They would meet me on the bus or whatever else. You were the empathy woman because I carried that sign. Because the the America that we want to make great again in this fundamentalist view doesn't really involve empathy or altruism. It's all about us. Crank it, bring on the rapture. Uh, Armageddon is a good thing because we're going to get raptured. And the people that are suffering in this terrible battle, they're supposed to suffer. So we should have a wonderful, different, more scientific view, right? We should have the Darwinian evolution view, which might be okay to a point if we actually were reading Darwin, but we're not. And we're using strange ideas and stock phrases. We're taking the idea of natural selection and survival of the fittest, but we don't understand what those ideas mean. Natural selection and survival of the fittest refers to the evolution of species. The species that are fittest will survive the longest, and there'll be a natural selection where the best species will live the longest. When I was quite a little girl in junior school, I recited a poem on Eohippus. It was a long poem, and people were proud of me that I was reciting it. But Eohippus was the little early horsey, and all the other species that were around at the time were so much bigger. But it was Eohippus that survived, the little Eohippus survived and became horses, and they're here to this day, and there are plenty of them because we make use of them and we love them and we breed them. So little Eohippus was a fittest species and survived, and the great dinosaurs ruled the world for so long. Our whole human history is nothing. We haven't gotten very far at all. The dinosaurs were there for the longest time, but in the end, they were gone. So that's really what natural selection and survival of the fittest means. That those species that are the fittest to survive will survive, and those traits within those species that are the most helpful will survive. Even like how we talk about sickle cell anemia and the sickle cell trait. And it became a natural selection for the sickle cell trait in Africa because the Plasmodium falciparum, the protozoa that creates malaria, doesn't like sickly cells. So if you have sickle cell trait, you're protected against malaria. You won't die in childhood. You'll live and you'll breed. That trait will get passed on. As long as you only got it from one side, you won't be sick because you'll have enough normal shaped red cells as well. So that's really the kind of thing we're talking about with natural selection and the survival of the fittest. The best suited species will be selected and will survive. The most helpful biological traits will be selected and survive. But we have taken and abused this natural selection and survival of the fittest to serve the free market economy and capitalism. I made it because I'm fitter. There was a poll that showed that more than 40% of people polled think God helps those who help themselves comes out of the Bible. It does not come out. Not only does it not come out of the Bible, it is the opposite of what the Bible says. It is the opposite of what five major world religions teach. Because all of the five major world religions teach love, kindness, compassion, altruism. They do not teach God helps those who help themselves. I'm all right, Jack. That's not what they teach. But it's a great concept for capitalism. Sink or swim. I I got mine, you get yours, etc. So this is also not a helpful cosmogony. And it's not really Darwin. The book Darwin wrote about humans is The Ascent of Man, and that book is full of love. The word love occurs many, many times in that book. But because we have a distorted story that we tell ourselves about evolution, we can justify poverty because poor people are supposed to be poor. It's their lookout. The free market economy. We're not going to have equality because this free market economy and capitalism keeps concentrating more and more wealth in fewer and fewer hands. So it's not going to bring us into the real age of Aquarius because we're not going to have equality or come to that liberty. Ferdinand and I have been talking about how even some initiatives that in themselves feel seem very good and very helpful might just be the thin end of the wedge. Like there's a charity that provides safe parking and toilets for people that live in cars and they don't have a home, they have a job, they work hard, maybe two, three jobs, and they have a car. That's all they have. Let's give a place for them to park, place for them to have a toilet and a shower so they can go to work. Or in Denver, they're making tiny homes, or people are living in containers. In a way, it seems really good because we have to get people housed and off the street. And in another way, I'm like, this is the thin end of the wedge. We're all going to be supposed to live in our cars. As more and more wealth gets concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, and the so-called American dream becomes more and more unavailable. It took me a long while to figure out what the American dream was, but I think it was about owning your own home, which is getting more and more and more and more impossible. Back in the UK, my uh, the house that we moved to when I was 11 in Ipswich, my parents bought it for £8,000. Now I know there's been a lot of inflation since then, but it was a house that a family with one and a bit incomes could afford to buy. One and a bit incomes and four children to look after. They could afford to buy it. It's very hard now for people to afford to buy their own home, uh, because the equality is not really happening. So the cosmogony of distorted evolution isn't helping us. It doesn't help us to look after the earth. It doesn't help us to look after each other. It doesn't help to bring in the age of Aquarius. And the other one we have going, the creationism, doesn't help us to care for the earth, which we're the lord of, the boss of, we're dominating. Doesn't help us to care for each other because in the end, only the few, the us, are going to get picked. And we're going to go somewhere better anyway. Doesn't even help people to better themselves. This is something that has been coming on since the industrial revolution. That if you can convince people that that their real future is off this planet in heaven or the rapture or wherever, then you can get people to be more content with the poverty and misery they live in now and not to rise up against it. So where are we going to look for a cosmology, uh, cosmogony that helps us to move into the best version of the age of Aquarius, not the all the really smart people will go live on Mars, where incidentally they're going to die of cancer within 15 years or something, and lots of AI will uh, fill the world with the light of intelligence or awareness or something, which is not really what it is. So let's think for a moment about Bereshit, Genesis. Let's think for a moment about the very beginning of the Bible. Bereshit bara Adonai et hashamayim et haaretz. And all our Bibles translate that as, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So when Sudanander and I had the opportunity to study with the late, great Rabbi David Cooper, who was filling in for Reb Solomon, while he was going for his wedding and his honeymoon with Eve Ilson, Rabbi David Cooper explained this to us. He translated this Hebrew. Bereshit, in the beginning. Bara, there arose. Adonai et hashamayim et haaretz. We could translate this effectively as, in the beginning, there simultaneously arose the God, the heavens, and the earth. Because if there are a heavens and an earth, there has to be a God to look after it. There has to be a God to rule it. We'll come back to that again in a little while. But if there are a heavens and an earth, there has to be a God to rule it. As long as there's duality, there's also God. Beyond that, there's Ein Sof, because actually Kabbalah is radical non-dualism. So going back to the song that I sang at the beginning, Vidhamitam Purushai Mahantam Adityavarnam Tamasa Parastat Twamivam Paditva Patutmartameti Nanya Panta Vidyate Yanaya. I know that true person shining like the sun beyond the dark. Only by knowing him one passes beyond death. There is no other way to the abode. So this is from Svetasvatara Upanishad, which is a very interesting, slightly later Upanishad, and is the first place where we see the inkling of divine personhood. That there is a person who shines like the sun beyond the dark. That person brings us beyond death. We see that person also in the teachings of Adam Kadmon, and in Islam, it's the Nur Muhammad, which is the light of the Prophet that was shining before before all the worlds were made. The Nur Muhammad was already there. So we have this true person. What we're trying to see is a cosmogony, an understanding of our world that helps us to relate to our earth in a holistic way and that introduces the will to compassion. So in the Vedas, there's the hymn Purusha Suktam, and we'll be studying that hymn together in a short while during our subtle therapies course when we look at the Vedic worldview. This hymn is so important. The Purusha is this supreme person, and he fills the worlds, all the worlds, with 3/4 of his being, the tripad, the 3/4. There is still a remaining quarter. This is important because we don't want to create a worldview of pantheism, because pantheism means God is the sum total of everything, which really belittles God. Whereas what it explains in the Purusha Suktam, he fills the world with 3/4 of himself. Or also in the Upanishads, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. This is full. This whole phenomenal world is full, complete, perfect. That is full. Everything beyond the phenomenal world. From fullness, fullness flows. This is my own translation. The fullness of the entire phenomenal world flows from that fullness of that other quarter. Take from fullness, fullness. You subtract the entire phenomenal world. Purnameva vashishyate. Fullness remains alone. There's still, God doesn't depend on the phenomenal world. But God enjoys the phenomenal world. You can take off the whole phenomenal world like taking off your clothes. But we don't necessarily want to run around naked. The people that I saw in Africa, where you totally could run around naked if you wanted to, because it's like nice and hot, spend a lot of time adorning themselves, making beautiful jewelry and lovely things to wear. The display, the beauty, the phenomenal world is the display, is the beauty. It's the clothing and the jewelry which is being assumed by that for fun. So what happens? The gods, who are all really expressions of Purusha, take Purusha and they tie him to a sacrificial post and they sacrifice him. And when they do that, the many comes forth from the one. The whole world comes forth, the entire phenomenal world. All the people, all the vegetation, all the animals, everything comes out from the body of Purusha, all the different kinds of human beings. The intellectual and teachery kind of human beings come from the head of Purusha, and the warriors and the activists come from his arms, and the farmers, the artisans, and the people who see we have food to put on the table come from his belly, and the people who go out there and grow the food and do the hard work come from his legs and feet. This is actually a story about equality, that we are all made of the same body, of the same Purusha, although it has been distorted into a caste system where the people that came out of the head are way more important than the people that came out of the feet and legs. If you've ever hurt your foot and not been able to walk on it, you'll see how not true that is. And in fact, what defines us as different from other primates is our big toe. They don't have a big toe. We are, our feet are part of what makes us human. So as long as we understand that having feet and legs and having arms and having a belly and having a head are all equally important, then we can bring forth equality and compassion out of this story, because it's the story that tells us that the entire phenomenal world is the body of the Supreme Person. Going back, Bereshit bara Adonai et hashamayim et haaretz. In the beginning, that created the gods, the heavens, and the earth. Because if there's a heavens and an earth, there has to be a God. That God is called in Hebrew Adonai, but it's not the same as Ein Sof, that ultimate reality from whom the whole thing comes. In the Vedic view, that is called as either Purusha or Ishvara. Ishvara means the one that gets to rule over the heavens and the earth. As long as we have that duality, as we see a heavens and an earth, we have to have one will that rules over the heavens and the earth. This is also explained in the Brahma Sutta Bhashya of Shankara, that we can all realize our true nature as Brahman, the ground of all being. But we will never become Ishvara, we'll never become the Lord of the world, because only one will can rule the world. As long as there's a world, as long as there's a heavens and an earth, there's a God to rule it. We go into non-duality, there's only Brahman. There's only Ein Sof. We can dispense with that Ishvara or that Adonai idea at that point. Once you dissolve that whole triad, the God, the heavens, and the earth, then there's only Brahman. So there also is another way of seeing that first chapter of Bereshit or Genesis. It doesn't have to be the wind-up toy way. We tend to sort of like God made the world once upon a time and then sort of left it alone. But according to Kabbalah, that's not at all how it happens. If God made the world once upon a time a long while ago, and it's going to end with Armageddon and all that stuff, and in between certain important things have happened, like the Exodus or Jesus' crucifixion, the saving acts of God, and we're progressing linearly along this. We're going from cosmogony to eschatology, and the titles will roll, and it's going to be all over. But it's in actual Kabbalah, it's not linear like this. Every Sunday, the world begins anew. Every Sunday, God utters the words, "Let there be light." And every Sunday, Ein Sof is stepped down, just like how we understand in Samkhya. There's a stepping down. There's a step down to Chesed, that steadfast love, that divine generosity. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov said that God pulls aside the hem of his robe to create a space for the world to happen. It's the divine generosity. Let there be light. Every Monday, God has a look-see and sees that everything's covered with water that's simply all over everywhere. And every Monday, God takes and divides the upper and the lower waters in a primordial act of severity. That's Gevurah. So every Monday, again, there's this severity, this division. Every Tuesday, God brings forth all the beautiful green growing things. On Monday, when God divides, he doesn't really like having to mess with stuff and divide it, and he doesn't say it's good. But on Tuesday, when he makes all the green growing things, he says twice, Tov, it's good. He sees what he's made, and he sees that it's very good, and he sees that it's very good. And this is the heart, Tiferet, the divine beauty that manifests each and every Tuesday. On every Wednesday comes Netzach. God makes the sun, the moon, and the stars click, click, click. They're clicking through space. They're marking time. And they're not only marking time, they also mark space. Now we have GPS. But not so long ago, when my dad got his skipper license, he had to know how to use a sextant. So he had to know how to navigate his boat from the British Isles to Scandinavia by the stars. So it's the sun, moon, and stars that determine both time and space. And that's netzach, that's efficiency. And every Thursday, God makes the birds and the fishes that are diving and are flying, that are so beautiful, and that's hod, that's the splendor, that's the elegance. And every Friday, things get really, really juicy. With your sword, God makes human beings. And in chapter 2, God takes Adam, right, and makes him out of clay, which is the meaning of Adam, and breathes into him the breath of life, but then he's all lonely, so he takes a spare rib and makes Eve. That's a slightly more recent version in terms of Torah time, which is long ago time. But in chapter 1, it just says that God made human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. So these beautiful beings who are the living representations of God and who have the juiciness of sexual differentiation come forth every Friday. And on Saturday, God has a look around and he sees, well, I made everything. Let's have a rest because everything is perfect. Everything is filled with goodness. The divine energies, the Ein Sof, the unknowable, have been stepped all the way down to where heaven and earth unite, which is why on Shabbat you are supposed to make love to the one you love to enact that uniting of heaven and earth. So this is not a linear version that God made the world once upon a time, a long while ago. The designer of our world has not gone to sleep. The world is created each and every day. It's a co-creation. It is forever ongoing. And in this version, there is no difference between creation and evolution. Understanding things with some of these inklings from much earlier cosmogonies than the ones we currently use could help us to have a worldview that introduces the will to compassion and the care for the earth. Because we and God on a daily basis are co-creating our world. Because everything is made of the body of the same supreme person. So everyone is equal. And with that equality comes the right for everyone to have liberty. And with that equality comes that feeling of kinship, of fraternity, of sisterhood, brotherhood, not only with all human beings, but with all the life forms. Because in the end, we're all sparks of the same Purusha. And then our job becomes to return the sparks to the one. Our job becomes, in the Kabbalah worldview, to perform the mitzvot, to perform the conscious actions, the way to respond consciously to the divine invitations with each and every tiny thing, so that the sparks of the divine in each and every tiny thing can be liberated and return to the one. And in the Vedic worldview, to perform the satkarmas, to perform those true actions that return the scattered fragments of the Purusha from the many back to the one.
Thank you for tuning in to Ayurveda and Spirituality with Alakananda Ma. We hope today's exploration has ignited a spark of curiosity and insight within you. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and share it with a friend. For more enlightening discussions and practical wisdom on Ayurveda and spirituality, subscribe and join our Facebook group, Alundi Ayurveda. To allow us to continue sharing valuable content, consider donating to Alundi Ashram. The links will be in the show notes. Until next time, may you walk the path of Ayurveda with grace and embrace the light of spiritual wisdom in your journey.
Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushti Devadana Urvarukamiva Bandana Mrityu